Recently, I started a series based on the story of Peter's denial, and we found that story in Luke chapter 22 and verse 54 to 62. As we looked at the story, you know how Peter was challenged about knowing whether he knew Jesus or not, whether he was a disciple of Jesus, as Jesus was going to his trial, and 3 times he denied Jesus. That was the biggest failure that he had in his life. And from that story, we saw in the first message 3 things that Peter did prior to that made him vulnerable to that failure. And in the second message, we started to examine 3 things that Peter did that helped him to be able to rebuild a new and successful life, and in fact, a new ministry and the beginning of the church. And both of those messages are available if you revisit on YouTube. The first thing that Peter did to climb out of failure was that he allowed himself to grieve the failure. He did not rush over his grief. He owned it, and he learnt from his grief. And so today we're going to have a look at the second thing that Peter did that actually took him from that place and pushed him forward into a better place. And the second thing he did is he let his small group support him. Now, you didn't know through reading the Bible that would be in there, did you? You got to look because it's in the fine print. And you find that there are many times that people meet together in small groups. I want to ask you this question: who are you doing life with? And apart from Jesus, who helps you the most in life? And who are your friends? Who are they really? You know, the power of friendship in a small group is large, really large. It's huge, actually. There's a book called The Captured, and it's a true story written about the children and the women who had been kidnapped in the 1800s in the pioneer days in Texas. And they were forced in their kidnapped state to live in the Indian tribes. And of course, the families who lost their loved ones or had them kidnapped from them, they would try earnestly to locate them and find out where the Indians had taken them. When they found them, they tried to procure them back through various means. And as they did that, they came up against a problem. And the problem was, if they had been living in the tribe for 6 months or more, that they didn't want to come home to their family. Wow. Now, to the Western mind, that seems like you live in a civilized society and you want to live with the savages. But there was something about the Indian culture and the Indian way of life, that small group setting, that tribal setting, that had an appeal and had a pull on those people that once they had been and experienced that they wanted to live in that rather than in what we would class as a civilized society, but it wasn't really that civilized. And that was the power of belonging to a small group. You know, when Jesus started his ministry, the first thing he did was he set up a small group. He started a small group of 12 disciples, and they were his go-to people. They were the people he was going to do life and ministry with. And so he started that small group. And you know, for the first 300 years of Christianity, the church was done primarily in small groups. In a small group, what happens is you let people support you. And where possible, you give support to other people. There's a mutual exchange of energy, of life, of love, of compassion, and everything that's good in humanity. And so in that small group, even if you are leading a small group, the fact that you give to that group of people and you invest in that group of people, you actually receive something back from the group. As you see them grow, as you see them mature, as you see good things happen in their lives, as you see them progress, there's a satisfaction and there's even a reflection back to you as a leader. And sometimes the group actually speaks to you And sometimes you are challenged by things that the group says to you. So there's this mutual exchange, as it's really healthy in our lives. And as has been mentioned this morning, on Wednesday we start up our life group meetings for the year. And our motto for our groups is doing life together. And that's what we want our small groups to be. We don't want to over-spiritualize our lives, which can be the tendency in Christian circles at times. We want to be practical with our lives. We want our Christianity to be visible in a way that helps us live our lives and also helps those that we meet live their lives better. And so I'm here today urging you to get into a small group this year. Now, for some of us, we have things going on in our life that make us think, oh, I'm not quite ready for that. I don't really feel comfortable doing that. Or you may have been through some trauma or something and you might find it difficult. But I want to tell you this morning, it'll do you good. If you make the effort, it'll do you good. It really will. Your small group will help you see what is really important to the success of your life. It will help you find God in everyday experiences of life, which is really important. I have a couple of examples from the scripture and from Peter's life, strangely enough. See, we were studying Peter, and Peter had some small group experiences that lifted him from the greatest failure of his life out of that failure to the greatest success in his life. And the first small group example is found in Mark chapter 16 and verse 10. And it's Easter morning. And Mary Magdalene has just met Jesus at the tomb. And she goes running after meeting the resurrected Christ. And she finds the disciples. And they are together in a small group. And what are they doing? They're mourning and they're weeping, because they've just been through the most gruesome experience of their life, seeing the man that they love crucified cruelly on a cross. How traumatic is that? You can't get more trauma than that. And they are weeping together. You know, Matthew chapter 5 and verse 4 says, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted." That's exactly what happens in a small group. If you're going through something, if there's a loss or a grief in your life, and you go to your small group, they're going to cry with you. They're going to weep with you, and they're going to comfort you. And so this is what happens in a small group. When something goes wrong or failures in our life, we can feel embarrassed. And sometimes we want to hide, and we don't want to know people. We don't want anyone to know what's happened in our lives. Perhaps you've lost your job, or you've gone bankrupt, or you have a date that's gone bad, or you get sucked in by a scammer. You don't want people to know that necessarily, do you? You're embarrassed. And so it's natural to isolate yourself when bad things like that happen in our lives, when things go wrong. But we have to actually resist the urge, because internalizing the pain is actually not good for us. It actually hurts us and harms us, and it drives the pain deeper, and it affects our soul more cruelly when we don't let the pain out. You know, just as surely as leaving a splinter in your foot will not go well for you, the cause of your pain has to come out. And sometimes the pain will come out by deliverance prayer. Sometimes it'll come out through healing of your emotions. Sometimes it'll come out by just simply telling someone else who is trustworthy your story. And that's what can happen through a group of people, a small group of people who you can trust and you can do life together with. You know, when you go through something bad, you don't need to tell everybody. I'm not saying, you know, shout all your bad news from the rooftops. That's completely unwise. And how many people do that all over Facebook these days, or Instagram, or whatever? It's not healthy. Wisdom says, find people you can trust. That's why the Bible talks about gossip being evil, because when people gossip about you, that's a destructive thing. It erodes trust. It erodes confidence. It undermines people. It hurts people. These are things that we don't want happening in our world. And so we have to be discerning and careful about who we trust with the information about our lives. But there will be somebody that you can trust. There will be somebody that you can lean on. And hopefully they are in your small group. Just a select few people who you can love, and they love you, and you can pray. They can pray for you and support you. You know, a problem that is shared is a problem that is halved. You know, there's something about unloading on somebody that actually lifts a weight off your shoulders and makes you feel understood, makes you feel better, makes you feel like you're not carrying it all on your own. And equally, when you have something to celebrate, a joy in your life, and you share that joy with other people, that joy is amplified, it's doubled. And so there's a win-win situation here, that when you have a problem and you share it, you feel better. And when you have something that's exciting that you want to share, a joy, you amplify it, and it gets bigger and better. And so it's a good, healthy thing to be sharing your life and doing life with other people. You know, we were never meant to do life alone. That's why God created Eve, so that Adam would not be alone. There was once a cynical woman who actually disagreed with that statement, and she said that God created Eve because he couldn't trust a man to get the job done. Of course, none of those people are in the room today. So where does Peter go after his failure? The hugest, biggest failure he'd ever made in his life. He'd thrown away 3 years of training, denied Christ. He instantly goes to a small group. And that's why in Romans chapter 12, verse 15, it says, rejoice with those that rejoice and weep with those that weep. Sounds like what happens in a small group. You know, Denise and I have a small group of people that we trust, that we work with, and we share ideas with, and we often meet. All of those people are longtime friends of ours. We've done life together for a long time. We know each other's weaknesses and strengths. We know that none of us are perfect, but we know that deep in our hearts there is a love and a mutual respect for each other, where we can do life together and help each other. And we treat each other like brothers and sisters. And we cannot say we're always there for each other, because nobody is always there for everybody. There's always going to be a moment in your life when there's nobody there. But see, the beauty of doing life with other people is that hopefully the majority of the time somebody is there for you. And we are there for each other enough of the time, more often than we are not. And so there's a safety net there. And even if we fall through that safety net and we see something happening in each other's lives, we have enough sense to go and ask and try and help each other that way. We love each other enough to share our most embarrassing moments and our heartaches, our failures with each other. I want to ask you this morning, who do you let into your world? Who are you letting into your world? And who do you share life with? And what will you do this year to let someone into your life this year? Somebody who you can trust. While you're thinking about that, let's go to our second and final example that I'm going to pull out of the scripture today. On the same day, they had met in the morning and they were huddled in their small group supporting each other. The same day, that night, they are found again in the same house and they are supporting each other again. And we read that in John chapter 20, verse 19 to 20. That evening, the disciples were together with the doors locked for fear of the Jewish leaders. Suddenly, Jesus appeared in the middle of the group and said, "Peace be with you." And the disciples were filled with joy when they saw the Lord. This is the first time that they had seen Jesus after his death. It was a whole brand new experience. You know, when you are in trauma, it's hard to hear God. It's hard to see God in your life. And sometimes you doubt that he's there even at all. And there's another reason that we need a small group. Because when we're in a small group, Jesus sometimes turns up in the group. And I don't know about you, but I think Jesus turning up in our lives is a good thing and something to be desired. And how does Jesus appear in your small group when you go to a small group? Well, sometimes people will say something that switches a light bulb in your head or gives you a revelation or an understanding that you didn't have before. And that can be God speaking to you and challenging you and helping you in some way in your life. Sometimes people will just pray a prayer that releases something good into your life, and all of a sudden you feel better. You feel that something's happened and something's changed in your world as a result of their prayer. You know, Jesus speaks to us in many ways through our group. His presence in that group can change our hearts and our minds and set us in a whole new direction. How many times have you talked to somebody and something that they've said has just made you think, you know what? I need to think differently about that. They've got a point, and that point starts to come home to us, and it sets us on a whole new direction. Your small group can steer you in a whole new direction. Jesus also told his disciples, wherever 2 or 3 of you are gathered in my name, I will be there in the middle of your gathering. That's a promise from Christ himself. And if Jesus is turning up in your small group and you're not there, you are depriving yourself, friend, of an opportunity to hang out with Jesus. And why would we do that? You know, every time we go, we need to expect that Jesus is going to turn up in that meeting for us in some way, shape, or form. This reason is so important because in a crisis, we don't think straight. The bigger the loss in our lives, the less likely we are to think straight. And so you need people around you to help you think clearer so you can climb out of your hole, out of your tough times, and climb into a greater position of success. Now, Peter and the disciples mostly hang out together in a small group, processing what they'd gone through, the death and now the resurrection of Jesus. And I want to finish with this story this morning. The sequoia trees of California, known as the redwoods, they are truly spectacular. I don't know if you can see it there, but if you look down at the bottom of the tree, you will see a human being standing there looking like an ant. And the trees are so tall that they don't even fit into the picture. Towering as much as 90 meters above the ground, they are spectacular. But these towering trees have unusually shallow roots, and their roots spider out across the surface of the ground to catch as much of the surface moisture as they can. And this is their vulnerability, because the storms and the heavy winds would almost always bring these giant trees crashing to the ground. But you know what? That rarely happens. And you know why it rarely happens? It's because they grow in clusters. They grow in groups, and they intertwine their roots, and they provide support for one another against the storms. And when we are together, either as a family or a church, we provide the same support for each other. Pain and suffering come to all of us, but just like those giant trees, we can be supported in those difficult times that blow against us to destroy our lives and topple us over. And that support comes by touching one another's lives. Those roots are intertwined. And as we wrap our lives around each other and we support each other, we will all survive the storms of life. The knowledge that we have someone, that we are not alone, that there is someone who is willing to touch us, hold us, and keep us from being destroyed, will keep us strong in the biggest storm. You know, the best time to build your support system and your support network, like those roots, is now, before the storm comes, before the crisis comes. All sorts of things are going to come our way in the future. We have no idea what this year is going to bring to any of us. Build your support network now. Peter had a place to go with people who cared, and they helped each other get through. They really did. We have seen with the recent COVID breakout up in Auckland how easy it is for community transmission to start again. And if that happens, we will all be in lockdown again, and church life and life groups may be back on Zoom again. Oh, we don't really want that, but it may have to be. So get the most now, while we can meet in person, while we can hug one another. You know, that's one of the biggest things you missed about being on Zoom, is you couldn't hug someone or shake their hand or, embrace them in some way. And so now, right now, while we've got the opportunity, make the most of that opportunity. Get the most out of your life group, because we don't know what this year holds for us. Hopefully it's good. We need to prepare for the best and prepare for the worst, and be ready for what either comes. Build your support network now, so that if we go back to those restrictions, that we actually have built relationships with people who want to reach out to us, who want to connect to us, who want to ring us up, who want to FaceTime us or connect with us or check up on us to see how we're doing. Let's do life together in a small group this year, just as the Apostle Peter did. And he climbed out of his failure into success.